What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
On my wedding day, while the world around me blurred into flowers, perfume, and whispered voices trying to pin my veil just right, my phone lit up with a message that froze me harder than any altar vows ever could. It was from my father, the same man who once told me he could never look at me again. The message read, "We're at the door. Can we see you before you walk down the aisle?" I didn't reply. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling, but the silence felt heavier than any words I could possibly send. And maybe you think that makes me cruel. Maybe you're already imagining some father who made mistakes, but always loved his daughter deep down. No. To understand why I let that text sit unanswered, you'd have to go back to the day my entire life came apart, the day I learned just how far someone's jealousy could ruin me. I was 17, and I thought I knew who my friends were. If anyone had asked me back then, I'd have told them Megan was practically my sister. We spent summers in each other's rooms, we whispered about boys, we even dreamed about leaving our small town together for some big city life. She was sharp, funny, and for a while I thought she had my back. But behind all that laughter, she was studying me, waiting for a moment to strike. And when she did, she didn't use fists or weapons. She used words, whispers, and the kind of rumors that bury a girl before she even has a chance to speak for herself. It started small. Megan told a few classmates that I was easy, like some free sample they handed out at the mall. I laughed it off at first, because teenagers are cruel and sometimes gossip dies as quickly as it spreads. But she didn't stop there. She twisted my kindness into weakness, my shyness into guilt, and before long she added something darker, that I wasn't just easy, but that I was messing around with drugs, dealing them even. I never touched anything stronger than a Diet Coke, but that didn't matter. Megan knew how to plant seeds that grew like weeds, choking out every truth. One afternoon, I came home to find my parents waiting in the living room, my father's jaw locked tight and my mother's eyes already wet. I thought someone had died. In a way, someone had me. They didn't ask, they didn't listen, they didn't even consider that maybe their daughter wasn't the kind of person who hid pills in her backpack. Instead, they threw words at me like bricks: disappointment, shame, filth. And when I tried to explain, when I begged them to just look at me, they told me Megan had shown them proof. Some text messages, screenshots, things I never wrote, conversations that never happened. My mother said, "We can't let you drag this family down." My father said, "We can't even look at you." They packed me a single bag. That's what sticks with me even now, the way my mother folded the clothes silently, not crying, not shaking, just folding like she was getting rid of a guest who overstayed. They left my childhood trophies on the shelves, my photos on the walls, but me? I had no place in that house anymore. When the door shut behind me, I wasn't their daughter. I was a burden cut loose. That night, I sat on the curb outside, my whole world crammed into a duffel, and I kept thinking about how quickly your life can tilt. One lie, one manipulative girl, and suddenly you're a stranger to your own parents. I wanted to believe they'd come after me, that maybe they just needed to cool down. But the hours stretched, and the street grew darker, and nobody came. The silence was deafening. I crashed on a friend's couch that first week, trying to keep my head above water, but the betrayal didn't just stop at home. At school, teachers looked at me differently. Classmates whispered, eyes slid away when I walked past, and sometimes I swore I could feel the word easy branded on my forehead. Megan smiled at me in the halls, like she hadn't just destroyed my entire existence. She waved once, casually, as if daring me to say something, to scream the truth. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because no one would have believed me. There's a particular kind of loneliness that sinks into your bones when even your family won't defend you. I remember lying on that couch, staring at a water-stained ceiling, replaying everything I had ever told Megan, secrets, crushes, fears, and realizing she had collected them like weapons, loading them one by one, waiting for the right moment to fire. And she had fired clean through me. What stung more than anything was my parents' certainty. If they had doubted me, even a little, I might have had something to hold on to, but no, they were convinced. To them, I wasn't the girl they'd raised, the one who got straight A's, the one who stayed up late drawing on her bedroom floor. I was a stain on the family name, and they wanted me gone before anyone else noticed. So when I tell you I stared at that text on my wedding day and chose silence, understand this. That silence didn't begin in a white dress with roses on the table. It began years ago, when a door slammed shut, when a 17-year-old girl was left outside, carrying nothing but a bag and the weight of lies that were never hers to begin with. And as I stood there, half ready to walk toward the aisle, half trapped in the past, I couldn't help but think, maybe the real vows of my life weren't the ones I was about to say to Daniel, but the ones I made to myself the night my family cast me out. And I can tell you this much, revenge was already brewing, even if back then I didn't know exactly how it would look. I just knew I'd never let Megan, or my parents, or anyone else have the last word. Not after what they did. The first week out felt like a dare from the universe to see how far a person could shrink and still move through a town where everyone knew your last name. So I learned quickly that survival is not glamorous, that it looks like a borrowed toothbrush, a couch that sags in the middle like an apology, and a backpack you do not unpack because you never quite know when the next door will close. And when Shelby's mother said I could stay for a few nights, I smiled and said thank you while mapping bus routes in my head, pretending the word few didn't land like a countdown. I found a job at the diner off the highway where truckers nursed bottomless coffee and where the night cook sang along to old country tracks as if heartbreak was a national anthem. And because I was 17 with a face people still recognized from yearbook pages, the hostess trained me to tuck my hair up, keep my head down, and move fast enough that pity couldn't catch me. Patty, the day shift waitress who wore compression socks and a necklace shaped like a wishbone, taught me how to plate a patty melt so it looked like a decision rather than a compromise, how to tilt the coffee pot just enough to make a pour feel like kindness, and how to take an insult and fold it in half until it disappeared into your apron. What I didn't learn fast enough was how to brace for the moment when Megan came in on a Friday night with a pack of kids who loved the performance of cruelty almost as much as they loved cheese fries. The kind of kids who laughed with their whole bodies so the room understood that their laughter was an order rather than a response. They took the corner booth like they owned it, and when she saw me, Megan put a finger to her mouth as if we shared a secret, as if she hadn't sold my name like a discount, and her boyfriend, Troy, varsity shoulder pads, toothpaste commercial smile, pocket stuffed with a kind of confidence only other people can afford, asked loudly whether I was taking tips in cash or in pills because he heard I specialized in bulk. The table giggled, the hostess looked at the floor, and for a heartbeat I felt the old vertigo, the free fall of having no proof except the life you lived and the life they accused you of living. Then I remembered Patty's rule, that you never let a person define the angle of your back, so I stood straighter and poured water that didn't tremble. Humiliation is not silent. It rustles like napkins and scrapes like forks, and it builds a pressure that demands release, so I let a small, precise mischief bloom. Not the reckless kind you regret later, but the careful kind that teaches people that your patience is not permission. When the orders came in double bacon burgers, extra pickles, milkshakes that could stop a heart, I paged the manager and asked if I could run the nightly safety announcement because we'd had break-ins in the parking lot and corporate wanted consistency, which was true enough to pass without a blink. I lifted the mic the way Patty showed me, 2 fingers on the base, thumb off the switch until your breath is steady, and in my best customer service voice I said, "Attention folks, quick courtesy note. Please keep valuables out of sight, lock your cars." And a heads up to the owner of the silver pickup with the vanity plate that spells TRY. Your dome light is on and your glove compartment is hanging open. Heads turn like sunflowers toward a single point of light. Troy leapt up, redder than the ketchup bottle, and in his scramble to grandstand his way to the exit he clipped a chair, spun, and wore his own chocolate shake like penance, while Megan's laughter curdled into a hiss. It wasn't legalistic justice, and it wasn't violent, but it was the kind of tidy, surgical payback you tuck into your pocket for later, proof that I could still draw a line with a steady hand. The town did what towns do, it watched. And, because watching without acting is its own kind of guilt, people found small ways to signal they were not completely heartless. A pharmacist slipped me applications for a scholarship named after a woman who believed in second chances. Patty left coupons in my locker for groceries with yellow stickers. The night cook started sending me home with a paper bag that held a quart of chili and a spoon, which sounds like pity until you are hungry, and then it tastes like hope. My mother did not call, my father did not drive by, and every time the door chimed I braced for their faces even though I knew they would not come, because certainty does not stop the body from flinching. What did come? Late one closing shift when the dining room smelled like bleach and lemon and the air outside had that dry, electric hum that promises a storm. Was Shelby with an expression that made me set down the sugar caddy and follow her to the alley like we were sneaking out of class. She held her phone like it was dangerous and said a boy from band had sent her a screen recording because he thought I should see it before it disappeared, and when she pressed play I heard Megan's voice sharpen to a whisper as she told someone over video chat that the package is under ours name again because no one's going to stop her. They think she's reckless. The camera swinging clumsily across a bedroom where a purse lay open beside a neat row of white tabs, the screen freezing just long enough to capture a text preview that read, "Use her name at pickup." It hit me then with a clarity that replaced anger with strategy, because rage is loud and sloppy, but strategy is quiet and patient. Megan hadn't just lied about me, she had built a delivery system that wore my face like a mask, and in a town this small, every shadow cast by that mask would land on me first. I did not cry, I did not scream, I did not throw the phone against the wall, though the urge came in waves like the smell of bleach when you bend too close to the bucket. I asked Shelby to airdrop the video. I mailed myself a copy. I printed stills on the ancient office printer that dotted everything with faint gray freckles, and I tucked the pages into a manila folder labeled with the kind of blandness that keeps predators sleepy. Then I locked my locker, rolled down the flat of the metal door with a clatter that sounded like a verdict, and told Patty I might need a morning off soon for an appointment, which was true, just not the kind she assumed. If the first small revenge had been a chocolate shake and a vanity plate, the next one would be cleaner, colder, and aimed where it would count, and as the alley light flickered and the night itch of the highway rose like a chorus, I understood that the story Megan started with a whisper would be the story I would end with documentation. And timing, because timing is how you turn a rumor into a reckoning. The folder rode with me on the bus like a live wire, edges soft from my hands, and while the driver called out stops named after local saints and tire shops, I rehearsed the speech I would not actually give, because the point of a good move is not to be seen making it. So when I slid the manila packet into the anonymous slot at the district office, screen grabs, timestamps, the frozen frame with tabs spread like a cheap fan on a comforter, a short cover note typed on the diner's cash-out terminal. Because my home computer was a fiction, I felt the odd calm that comes after you finish threading a needle and understand that all that remains is to pull. They called it a wellness check when the school resource officer and an assistant principal knocked on Megan's door. But the search that followed had more to do with what fit into a backpack than what fit into a heart, and by the afternoon the halls were echoing with a new story, one with fewer adjectives and more evidence, and though I did not gloat out loud, I allowed myself a single childish flourish by mailing an anonymous bouquet of dandelions to her porch with a handwritten card that read, "Weeds thrive in cracks, try the lawn," which was petty, yes, but also felt like a small ceremony for the girl I used to be, the one who believed truth could simply stand there on its own and be recognized. The school moved fast because institutions love speed when it makes them look decisive, and the same adults who had once tilted their heads at me like they were smelling smoke now called emergency meetings where the words liability and safety were used with the fervor usually reserved for pep rallies. In a week, Megan was temporarily suspended pending review, which in town language meant the crown slipped, and even though she wasn't hauled away in cuffs, her audition for cheer captain evaporated. Her smiling photo quietly disappeared from the fundraising flyer, and somewhere in a counselor's office the magic letters that make recommendation letters hum lost their shine. My phone remained a quiet, rectangular brick. My mother did not text to ask if I was okay. My father did not show up at the diner to order decaf and say the word mistake. And when Shelby tried to intervene by printing the school's disciplinary notice and sliding it under our front door, my mother returned it to the waitress stand the next morning, pinned to a coupon for carpet cleaning with a sticky note that said, "We hope she gets help," which was almost funny if you enjoy the brand of humor where your lungs deflate and you carry them in your purse. It turned out revenge is a strange fuel, efficient, intoxicating, and not healthy in large doses, so I tried to convert it into motion, filling out the scholarship forms the pharmacist had slipped me, writing an essay in the lull between the dinner rush and last call about second chances that sounded more mature than I felt, and when the letter arrived with a seal and words like awarded and semester and housing, I laughed in a way that scared Patty. Because joy sounds unhinged when you are not used to it. I moved to a college 2 cities over with 1 suitcase and a stubborn streak, and if the studio smelled like old paint and the window air unit rattled like a shopping cart, it was still mine. And I learned quickly that the cheapest meals are entirely edible if you consider hot sauce a food group, that laundromats are confessional booths with better lighting, and that you can be completely alone and still feel watched by people who live in your head rent-free. My laptop chose the worst possible moment to die, the night before an ethics midterm, wheezing like a 60-year-old who has been running up a hill in January. So I dragged it to the campus help desk where a guy with a name tag that said Daniel looked at the machine like a doctor who believes in miracles, but orders tests anyway. He asked me what kind of life I had been putting it through, and I said, "The kind with cheap coffee and panic," and he laughed in a way that made me want to stand there longer than the repair required, and while he cloned a drive and made the cursor behave, we talked about classes and diner shifts and the talent it takes to maintain a straight face while customers explain the economy to a girl making minimum wage plus tips. And somewhere between his story about a brother who collected antique radios and my confession that I once fell asleep standing up during a double shift, something in me that had been clenched for months finally relaxed a notch. I did not forgive my parents, I did not forget Megan, and I did not suddenly transform into the kind of woman who journals gratitude and drinks cucumber water, but I started building a life that did not ask permission, a strange, stubborn architecture held together by deadlines, Patty's texts about orthopedic shoes, Daniel's habit of leaving sticky notes with dumb drawings on my door, and a quiet vow to keep receipts, actual paper ones and the metaphorical kind, because someday, I suspected, there would be an accounting. The first time I returned to town was for a community scholarship luncheon where they asked past recipients to speak, and I agreed because the free meal beat ramen, because I am not above a podium when a microphone is offered, and because there is a particular sweetness in standing under fluorescent lights and using full sentences in a building that once reduced you to a rumor. I talked about what second chances actually feel like, not cinematic, not tidy, often smelling faintly of bleach and bus exhaust, and how help sometimes arrives disguised as shift schedules and retired waitresses who teach you to stand up straight. And while people clapped politely and the mayor's wife dabbed at her eyes in a way that might have been allergies, I saw him at the back, my father, anchoring himself near the exit as if the carpet might buckle under the weight of recognition, hands in the pockets of the same jacket he wore to my middle school concerts, eyes fixed on me the way a person watches a thunderhead, not because it is beautiful, but because it might ruin the crops, and for a heartbeat I forgot my lines, felt the old tremor in my knees. Then finished anyway, thanked the donors, and stepped away from the microphone with the kind of smile you practice in the mirror. By the time I reached the hallway he had vanished, a ghost who left no breeze, and my phone lit with a missed call from an unknown number that had the same area code as home, followed by a text with no name attached that said, "Proud today." And while I stood there with a paper plate of cake and a fork that kept bending, the message blinked, then disappeared as if retracted, replaced by nothing, as if a hand had reached through the screen and snatched the words away. You can call it a glitch if you want, a pocket dial or a half-baked attempt at grace, but when the exit door swung on its hinge and the cold air hit my throat, I understood that the next move would not be mine. And that some reckonings arrive not with sirens, but with someone you love choosing the hallway over the conversation. Success did not arrive like a parade with confetti and a grand marshal waving from a convertible. It arrived in small, unglamorous increments that stacked into something sturdier than pride, clients who paid their invoices on time, a landlord who finally replaced the rattling air unit with a model that didn't cough, Daniel's apartment that smelled like clean laundry and black coffee because he believed detergent measured by the capful could fix at least half of life's problems, and a calendar that filled with deadlines tied to my name rather than someone else's rumor. And while I wasn't the type to frame certificates, I did let myself hang a corkboard that held ticket stubs from talks. A snapshot of Patty blowing out candles on a carrot cake the size of a manhole cover, and a postcard of the diner that, in the strange accounting of adulthood, had become the place where my spine learned to hold. I did not go back to town unless the trip made practical sense, and when I did, I parked on streets where the meter ran long enough that I didn't have to sprint. Then I walked past the high school like you pass an old bruise, aware of what it taught you, but unwilling to press it. And I sometimes wondered if Megan ever looked at the building and thought about the moment everything slid off the plate she had arranged so carefully, the moment rumor met paperwork and lost. News about her did not travel to me because I chased it. It arrived because a town like ours has a limited number of conversations it repeats with seasonal enthusiasm. And one spring it repeated the story of a traffic stop after midnight in a neighboring county, a glove compartment that fell open like a bad confession, a polite officer who said the phrase, "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," and a booking photo that somehow found its way to the same girls who used to write Bible verses on their binders. I did not cheer, I did not share the link, I did not pour a drink and toast the camera, but I did open the manila folder I kept in a locked drawer, the one with timestamps and still frames and names that had once felt heavier than law. And I read my notes, not because I wanted to relive anything, but because memory gets slippery when people rewrite themselves, and I wanted to be very sure of the difference between karma and the clean edge of a decision. What I chose next was not spontaneity. It was bookkeeping. I used an anonymous email account to send Megan's employer a packet that summarized irregularities in inventory and expense reports. Nothing embellished, nothing vengeful on the page. Only the arithmetic of petty theft and an attached spreadsheet color-coded with the kind of patient fury that looks like confidence. A week later her name vanished from the corporate website, and the only trace left was a job posting that described integrity with the zeal of the newly converted. And while the town pretended not to notice, it noticed, because towns always do. If that had been the end of it, maybe I would have felt hollow, because revenge without a future is just a loop, so I told myself I was allowed to move forward without checking the mirror every 10 minutes, and I did. Building weekend rituals with Daniel that involved farmers market peaches and the kind of picnic blanket that stains if you even look at grass, calling Patty on Sunday afternoons because she now timed her blood pressure medication to my updates, saying yes to projects that made my chest lift rather than sink. Then, because life refuses to keep a single storyline running at once, wedding planning arrived with its polite tyranny of lists, deposits, fittings, diets I politely ignored. A dress that startled me by making me look like a version of myself I might have believed in at 17, and a venue whose coordinator used phrases like guest flow and drama mitigation plan, which made me laugh until I realized the plan might actually be necessary. It was Daniel who asked first, not unkindly, not with pressure, but with the gentle practicality that had made me say yes to him long before he produced a ring, whether I wanted my parents there. Because the invitation list had entered the stage where names became plates and plates became money, I told him I was thinking about it the way a doctor says, "We're monitoring," which is true but also not an answer. And that night I lay awake composing the invitation in my head, turning the card into something between a bridge and a dare. I mailed it anyway, not because I believed they would come in goodwill, and not because I needed their approval to walk down an aisle I had built inch by inch, but because part of me wanted the record to show that the road was open and that they had to choose either to walk it or to stand on the shoulder and wave at passing cars while insisting they had tried. The envelope held the date and the dress code and the directions and nothing else. No handwritten apology solicited, no special seating. Note, no bait, and when the RSVP window closed without a reply, I told myself the quiet was a relief. that the door had stayed shut exactly as I expected, which would have been neat and tidy if the world respected neat and tidy more than it respected timing. The week before the wedding, a bouquet arrived without a card, lilies soft as lungs after a long cry, and behind them a folded note in my father's careful print that did not say I'm sorry, did not say we were wrong, did not say we believe you. Now, only that he had been listening at a luncheon to a young woman speak about grit, and something in him had shifted, which might have been a confession or a performance. I could not tell, and, because I could not tell, I did not reply. The night before the ceremony, when the rehearsal dinner had ended and the last relative had finally stopped offering unsolicited strategies for the placement of the dessert table, I set my phone on the nightstand and told myself I would not look at it again until morning, that nothing arriving after midnight would improve the day. And I slept the jittery sleep of a person who is trained for a marathon without accepting that the finish line always looks more like a decision than a banner. Dawn came with a sky the color of clean linen and a bridesmaid who functioned like a cheerful security guard, and I moved through hair and makeup and zipper hooks with a calm that almost felt earned, until the universe shook the snow globe with the softest possible finger, and the device I had banished lit up with a vibration that registered in my ribs before it registered in my ears. And I watched the screen stamp a name I had muted years ago across the glass, followed by a message that unfurled. Slowly, as if the phone itself needed a breath, a line that read, "We're at the door. Can we see you before you walk down the aisle?" And the room, which had been full of hairspray and humor and the easy noise of women who love you, receded to a point as small as a pin. Because whether I opened that door or not, whether I spoke or stayed stone, whether I chose the hallway or the altar, someone was about to learn the difference between a silence you weaponize and a silence you keep because it belongs to you. The bridal suite had been a hive of motion all morning, every corner buzzing with women pinning, zipping, curling, and spraying until the room felt more like a backstage wardrobe than the setting for a life-altering moment. But when my phone lit with that message, the air thinned until even the hum of the hairdryer seemed to fade. The words were simple: "We're at the door. Can we see you before you walk down the aisle?" Yet they detonated with the force of everything left unsaid across the years I spent cut from their lives, and while my bridesmaids fluttered around me, debating which lipstick shade whispered elegance and which screamed desperation, I was rooted in silence, locked inside a memory reel of doors that closed long before this one. In my head, I was 17 again, clutching a duffel that smelled like the inside of a locker, my father's face stone-carved in disapproval, my mother folding my clothes with an efficiency that suggested she had rehearsed the act of exile. And no matter how far I had come since, no matter how many speeches I had given, degrees I had earned, or contracts I had signed, that night had never stopped echoing in the hollow between my ribs. Yet here I stood in white satin, with a man who loved me waiting at the other end of a carpet scattered with petals, and still my father wanted to ask for access, not with apology, not with accountability, but with a casual presumption that timing could erase everything that came before. Daniel, ever attuned to me even in a room he was not in, had texted 20 minutes earlier to say he was ready whenever I was, his words steady, no trace of nerves, the calm anchor I had leaned on through every storm. And as I read his message again for strength, my father's words scrolled above it like an accusation. Did I want them to see me now? Did I crave their astonishment, their recognition that I had survived, that I had made something out of the ashes they left me in? Or was the silence I had wielded all these years the truer power, the sharper revenge, the proof that I no longer required their acknowledgement to exist? I walked to the mirror, veil trailing, my reflection layered like a palimpsest of every version of me, the girl with scraped knees who used to hold her father's hand at county fairs, the teenager accused of sins she never committed, the young woman learning to pour coffee for men who spat insults between bites of pie, the college student discovering the first tremors of belonging in Daniel's quiet laughter, and finally the bride standing at the threshold of a choice that was less about opening a door and more about closing a chapter. My bridesmaid Rachel noticed the phone clutched in my hand, asked with a half-smile if it was cold feet, and I shook my head, because this was not about doubt in love, but doubt in forgiveness. two entirely different breeds of hesitation. In a moment of defiance, I unlocked the screen and typed a reply that never left my drafts. You were supposed to protect me. Instead, you believed her. You shut me out. You don't get to walk me in now just because the dress looks clean. The words sat there, black against white, poised like a blade, but my finger hovered over send without pressing, because what I realized in that pause was that the act of explanation would grant them a weight they no longer deserved. Silence had been my punishment to them for years, but now it was no longer punishment, it was preservation. Silence was mine, not theirs. The coordinator knocked twice, announcing that guests were seated, and I slipped the phone into the drawer of the vanity table without ceremony, as if it belonged to a different life entirely. My father's message remained unanswered, my mother's silence unbroken, and maybe they were truly at the door, or maybe it was one last trick of timing, a text fired from miles away to see if I would stumble, but I did not stumble. Instead, I walked, veil brushed into place, bouquet pressed to my palm, Daniel waiting like the answer to every unasked question, and as the doors opened, the music swelling with the weight of ritual, I felt the whisper of movement behind me. A creak that suggested hinges shifting, and though every instinct screamed to turn, to know, to confirm whether they had breached the space or remained ghosts outside, I held my gaze forward. And so my story ends not with a confrontation but with a choice. I never turned to look, never confirmed whether my parents stood in that threshold watching the daughter they had cast aside reclaim her life in lace and vows. Because the truth is sometimes less important than the ownership of silence, and for once in my life, silence was not forced upon me, it was mine to keep.